Over the years, as the DCEU has unveiled and unraveled, I've been tough but fair when it comes to their films. Maybe more tough than fair. But the thing is, I want to love these movies. I grew up reading Batman. I watched the animated series. I watched Justice League, and I'm a huge fan of DC's and Warner Brothers animated films. So instead of just criticism, how about some feedback? Because you know what? If these films get better, we all win. And I realize that DC and Warner Brothers probably aren't listening. Or maybe they are. They're kind of desperate for good ideas right now. So for the first time on the internet, a nerd gives unsolicited advice on how to improve the film industry. This video will focus on the DCEU, so I promise I will try to keep that other company out of it as much as I can. Try. But you know, in the comic book world, in the comic book family, Marvel has always been the successful younger sibling, charming, energetic, and DC is really starting to feel the pressure. Which already leads me to my very first point. Number one, don't put the cart before the horse. Warner Brothers, DC, you are on the precipice of doing something that has never been done before other than by a company that's owned by Disney. And that is create a successful and ongoing cinematic universe. Is the DCEU successful? Well, financially, absolutely. Ongoing? That's more debatable, because look at it this way, DC, you're rushing. Everybody knows you're rushing. And we know you're rushing because Batman v Superman was the second film in your universe. You played a trump card almost immediately. Wow, the president has even ruined that little idiom. It also caused Sarcasm Troll and DC employee David S. Goyer to admit if we're doing Batman v Superman, we're probably already out of ideas. And DC fans, here's where you just have to admit, the reason they're rushing things, whether you want to admit it or not, is simply because they want to catch up to the level of success of that other company I promised not to mention. But here's the thing, DCEU, you don't have to rush in order to compete. One of your biggest financial successes and one of your only critical successes was Wonder Woman, an origin story. It's almost as if fans are willing to wait for films like Batman v Superman or Justice League, that we don't just want to see giant spectacles, but we want to see successful DC stories. And yet you're still planning a huge series of films that is all wrong for you timing-wise. The first solo film for The Flash has been announced as Flashpoint Paradox. Hard no. DC, Warner Brothers, you haven't earned that right yet, not in the cinematic universe, because the first story of Flash's cannot be an alternate universe. You haven't even established this universe, and you're going to give us a different timeline? You see, the X-Men universe did Days of Future Past after 6 films with the same characters. They set up the world. You're trying to do a similar thing with Flash after he's only been in 1. My best but possibly most lewd metaphor is DC, you've lost our respect because you already put out on the second date. And sure, we've hung out a couple more times, but it's never really been the same and it's really been awkward. Now suddenly you're calling us, asking if it's going to be a winter wedding or our groomsmen are going to wear blue? Whoa, DC! It was fun. I had a good time. That thing you did in the warehouse, yeah, I'll admit, got me going. But I really don't know if I can make Suicide Squad 2, so I'll text you. Funny I should mention The Squad because it brings me to point number 2. Stick with what works, get rid of what doesn't. Listen, nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, and that's even that other company that I promised not to mention. But the fact is, making the same mistakes over and over is self-destructive. That means that DC and Warner Brothers really have to make some tough decisions now. What does that mean? Well, it's time to trim the dead wood. Most notably, writers Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer. Terrio, who co-wrote Batman v Superman and then went on to write Justice League. And Goyer, who openly mocked the idea of Batman v Superman, is still supposed to write a Green Lantern movie in 2020? And whether or not you really buy the conspiracy that Warner Brothers used the Snyder tragedy to push Zack Snyder out, you have to admit, it's time for Zack Snyder to go, because in 3 films, the experiment has not worked. Which brings me to tip number 3, use your best resources. The talent behind these films is absolutely insane. I'm not talking about on-screen talent, I'm talking about behind the scenes. But the way that these people are being used is even more insane, even criminal. You still have Christopher Nolan in your back pocket as executive producer, but what does an executive producer do? I know the answer to that, but really, why did you keep him on? Because wasn't it to contribute to these stories? This is a man who can brilliantly tell a cinematic story. Or how about an Academy Award winning writer? You'll find him wearing the Batsuit for now. And if Affleck's commitment is wavering to this character or to the series of films as well, as much as it pains me to say this, it's time to let him go too. If you can't use Affleck as a storyteller, if you can't use Nolan as a storyteller, you still have another card to play, and that is Geoff Johns, a man who created all of these stories in the comic book in the first place. He's executive producer too, but I find he's being severely underused as a writer. I cannot understand how Warner Brothers has let 3 out of the 5 films they've made within the DCEU slip by with very subpar writing, and yet it seems that they're more than willing to interfere with the directing. Except, it would seem, in one case. Now, this could still be the case, but I haven't heard any reports of Warner Brothers or DC interfering with Patty Jenkins. And what happens? She created Wonder Woman. So you would question, why not ask Patty to influence a few things as well? If you're Warner Brothers and you're not going to allow Jenkins to at least advise on future films, then you have to admit point number 4, Wonder Woman is now your franchise. Now, when Batman v Superman came out, I thought it would have been Batfleck, but now, after her solo film and Justice League, she's the best character. There's no denying that. And Gal Gadot seemed like the only actor in Justice League who actually took that seriously. Granted, this may not be what Warner Brothers and DC envisioned. Maybe they wanted Superman to be the franchise. Maybe they wanted Batman. But you know what? At this point, who cares? Get over it. I guarantee you Marvel didn't expect Iron Man to take off the way that it did, either the film or the character, but they latched on to Robert Downey Jr. as soon as they could. You have the same kind of lightning in a bottle with this woman, especially considering she's a real-life superhero fighting against one of the greatest evils. Well, let's wrap this up like Ratner's career with tip number 5, just be yourself. What more can I say? This encapsulates everything. Just create your own stories. Create your own vision. Don't be Nolan, don't be Snyder, don't be Whedon, don't be Marvel. More importantly, in the first attempt at creating a cinematic universe, stop reinventing characters before you've invented them. It didn't work for the Joker. It didn't work for Lex Luthor. In fact, Jesse Eisenberg, in a 75-second post-credit scene in Justice League, was more Lex Luthor than he was in the entire 2.5 hours of Batman v Superman. Just believe in who you are. Believe in these characters. Believe in these stories. You have the audience. You're the company that invented not only superheroes, but the comic book blockbuster. So let's make audiences believe that men can fly again. Poll question, what do you believe is one thing the DCEU has gotten right? As always, leave your answers in the comment section below. However, also let me know, what do you think of this video? Is there anything you think I was too harsh on? Is there anything you agree with? But until next time, school's out. Hey Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.